We all are born with a propensity for our cognitive systems to fall somewhere on the continuum of abilities. Someone has to be in the bottom of the curve and someone has to be in the top of the curve. Those whose cognitive hardware, cognitive abilities, no matter which domain you survey, fall at the bottom of the curve are by definition mentally deficient, mentally handicapped. Neuropsychologists historically have used the term mentally retarded, although it may not be politically correct. But if you have all of your cognitive abilities in the bottom 2% or below the second percentile, you will have a hard time managing life's demands. At the other end of that continuum, if you survey one's cognitive hardware and everything comes out in the top 2%, that's what we've typically called gifted. Now, having a learning challenge is truly not relative to the average kid. It's relative to one's own cognitive potential. So the metaphor I make with kids when I'm trying to explain the results to kids of the testing process is you have to imagine cognitive hardware like horsepower in a car. Now, you ask the kids, what kind of cars don't have a lot of horsepower? Typically they say a Cooper or a Volkswagen or a Kia, not to insult Kia owners. And you say, what kind of cars have a lot of power? And they typically say Lamborghinis and Maseratis and Ferraris. Well, what if one has the horsepower of a Maserati, but has no air in one tire? When you're trying to compete with other Maseratis, you're going to have a heck of a time. Now that would be what the literature calls twice exceptional. We have many gifted kids that can't keep up with gifted kids once they get in honors and AP classes. Now dropping them back to average classes to compete with kids with average horsepower is one solution, but you're really selling the kid short. Now if your kid, if you happen to have the cognitive potential of an average horsepower car and you're struggling, then I assure you there's a systemic weakness in one of the core cognitive abilities necessary to manage school demands. So it can happen anywhere on the continuum. You could actually have low average cognitive horsepower, have a deficit relative to low average kids, and have a difficult time keeping up in classes where the average ability of the kids being taught is low average. Just as you can be gifted and have trouble managing the curriculum of a gifted program if you have one subsystem weaker than all of your colleagues. So you have to actually, when you're assessing kids, you have to stop looking at how kids relate to the average kid, and you have to look at how kids relate, their core cognitive abilities relate to their own propensity to have their scores cluster somewhere on the continuum of abilities. Now what are these cognitive abilities that neuroscience has agreed on? What I propose is I'll just present them in this video, and then we can take individual sessions, individual videos to look at each one in greater detail. And I'll also give you some concrete examples of what exactly each system is looking at. Typically, one can agree, no matter what area of neuroscience you find yourself hooked to, that the sensory motor system is a foundation for all systems. The ability of the skin receptors and the muscles and the joints to understand the position of the body in space and manage movement is a critical neurodevelopmental requirement for success in managing many things in life. Birth to 2, this is what babies do. They explore the world, they understand where their body ends and the world starts. They start to develop the grip, they start to develop bilateral coordination, they start to develop an ability to calibrate sensory input, not being hyper or hyposensitive to touch or sound or taste or smell. So these are called sensory motor issues or sensory integration issues, and most brains develop through this period as would be expected and can manage sensory and sensory motor activities quite well. Other brains can't. Weaknesses in this area contribute to all kinds of higher level problems with areas of academics, and even can contribute to difficulties with attention and social skills and just processing speed. It's a cascade of fallouts from this system being weak. Now, another system that everyone can agree on is speed and efficiency of information processing. Not everyone can manage information at the same speed. In my office, we have a joke. We say, do it at some, which means at the speed of Mike, which means I do everything very quickly. Sometimes it comes at the cost of details, but I do things quickly. But not everyone has the same moment of now. If you say do it now to two different people, you can have quite a different outcome. There's an episode of the Lucille Ball Show with Lucy and Ethel on an assembly line packaging chocolates. And you can see that the load or the pace of the conveyor belt exceeds their ability to package the chocolates, and they engage in some comical behavior to try to figure out what to do to manage that situation. But you have to think of the material coming across a kid's desk in school in the same way. It's like a conveyor belt. Not every child can manage the load of work at the pace presented by what average kids can do. Doesn't mean they're not smart. So processing speed, I would say, is a second critical variable to success in learning environments and success in general life situations. The next is working memory. Now, working memory has little overlap with short-term memory, and but working memory can mean immediate recall for what you're hearing or seeing, or it can mean holding what you're hearing or seeing in mental awareness and manipulating that information. The best example of what working memory is a waiter or waitress that can take the order without writing anything down, or they can recite the specials without looking at their notes. Now, while that waiter or waitress is taking care of your table, they're also, in their mind, managing their other 5 tables, thinking about what's happening in the kitchen and who needs water and who needs bread and who needs their bill. Now, the more you can hold, manipulate, manage in your mental clipboard, the more equipped you are to do everything. So some of us don't have such sophisticated working memory. Now, if working memory is weak, or processing speed is weak, or sensory motor abilities are weak relative to the rest of your brain, getting through a day of school is going to be very hard. These are the kids that come home from school and need to take a nap. They're so exhausted. Now, either will it manifest itself in a fatigue for those who stick it out, or it will amplify what looks like attention problems for those who give up. So I would say 95% of kids that have a diagnosis of ADHD, when you actually look at those 3 areas, processing speed, working memory, or sensory motor abilities, you have holes. You have gaps there, which just simply make getting through a school day a lot harder for those kids than other kids. Now, those 3 cognitive processing areas that I touched on, working memory, processing speed, and sensory motor functioning, are considered inhibitors or facilitators of learning. When those systems are working well, it makes everything easy. When those systems are not working well, it's going to be a brutal day.